Reclaim the Enlightenment is committed to recalling Belfast's progressive era in the late 18th century as an inspiration to seek new advances in the present. Going back to that 18th century era, to those living in 1789, human progress, whether by reform or revolution, seemed inevitable. Within a century, they had lived through a period which saw what was called the Glorious Revolution of 1690, which for radicals represented the end of absolute monarchy, and not simply a Protestant victory as Orangemen see it today. Then, within 10 years, they had seen the American Revolution, where a colony had established its right to independence and a republic. And most recently, the commencement of the French Revolution and the overthrow of absolute monarchy there. All this had a particularly potent effect in the overwhelmingly Presbyterian time of Belfast, where, despite their commercial success, the citizenry were entirely excluded from power and suffered from many of the disabilities endured by their Catholic fellow citizens. It is wholly appropriate that we should remember the attempt of many of them to rise up in revolt against such a state of affairs, to do no more than their American and French exemplars had achieved. Of course, they failed disastrously in 1798, and the danger then was that we merely obsess over the martyrology of the fallen and forget the continuing relevance of the wide-ranging and new principles that they embraced. Not for nothing did Thomas Paine's famous work, The Rights of Man, become the Koran of Belfast. They were the first in Ireland to advocate equal citizenship. Amongst other things, they were opponents of hereditary monarchy and aristocracy. They vehemently opposed slavery. They sought to relieve poverty and provide for the common good. They were advocates of the separation of church and state, and of free and universal education, and non-denominational education at that. They were advocates of an end to censorship and the liberty of the press. Far from engaging in cultural warfare, some of them wrote in Ulster Scots, while they sought to revive the Irish language and revive Irish traditional music. What is the relevance of all this to our condition more than 200 years later? It was in 1989 that Francis Fukuyama, I'm sure I got that pronunciation wrong, coined the phrase, the end of history. It was always an absurdity. History always moves on, and we should be concerned that it has moved on in baleful ways. Of course, our problem here in Northern Ireland is even worse than that. We have suffered from chronic and prolonged arrested development. The urgency of breaking the mold and of playing our part in ensuring that history progresses is in an enabling way was never more evident. How then can our forebears inspire us? One feature of their outlook, which surely has resonance today, in the era of Brexit, and of the emergence of virulent and narrow nationalisms on the international stage, was their internationalism. For them, although communication might take weeks or months, it was as though America and France were in their own backyard. They sought to work with sister movements elsewhere in the British Isles, the United Irishmen and the United Scotsmen. They supported the claims of other nations to the freedom that they sought in Ireland. And how far have we progressed with the principles that they espoused? It was only in the 20th century, and indeed finally in Northern Ireland in the 1960s, 70s, that equal representation of all citizens was achieved. There are still battles to be fought for women's rights and the LGBT community. Our understanding of the human condition and the different forms of human existence has advanced, and we have to recognize the expanded need to extend rights to new groups of people who were previously sort of disguised within the wider community. We still have an hereditary monarchy and aristocracy. They don't have quite the power they used to have. And we may not overthrow them today, but the absurdity of heredity as the basis of dominance within an unelected elite and as still massive holders of untaxed wealth remain. We have finally retreated from the nightmare of two states in Ireland which were de facto theocracies. But here in the north, theological imperatives can still derail urgent reforms. We do not have free and universal education because university students have to pay for it. Otherwise, we have a system divided by class, favoring the better off. We do not have non-denominational education. Slavery is abolished, but slavery continues. We treat refugees and immigrants as non-humans. Ostensibly, we have a free press, but eternal vigilance in respect of freedom of information is required, will always be required. There is the making of a Bastille Day agenda for us. You may not agree with all the points I've raised, but I think you'll agree with some of them. And in the year ahead, Reclaim will explore the past and some of these current issues. Thank you very much.
Robbie Burns, he was on everybody's tongue round here.
And just like us, he was inspired by the fall of the Bastille.
It seems an age since 1789. Things move on so fast.
Of course, the strange thing was that there were only 7 prisoners there.
Don't forget the 100 citizens who fell while capturing it.
And it was the beginning of the fall of the Enlightened regime.
And it didn't fall fast.
It gave us inspiration too. Here was a Catholic people overthrowing tyranny, showing their capacity for liberty.
So, we had our Northern Whig Club and now our Society of United Irishmen. We proclaimed a brotherhood of affection between Protestant, Catholic and Dissenter.
But could we make that a reality in this Presbyterian town of ours?
Well, here we are, in January 1792. At the great town meeting chaired by Sinclair Kelburn in our Presbyterian meeting house, debating that very issue.
As Irishmen, we have long lamented the degrading state of slavery and oppression in which the great majority of our countrymen, the Roman Catholics, are held. Nor have we lamented in silence. We wish to see all distinction on grounds of religion abolished. We anxiously wish to see the day when every Irishman shall be a citizen, when Catholics and Protestants, equally interested in their country's welfare and possessing equal freedom and equal privileges, shall be cordially united.
Of course, no one had the temerity to directly oppose this resolution. John Holmes rose to attempt a more subtle undermining.
May I suggest a rewording? We pray that the legislature may be pleased to repeal from time to time and as speedily as the circumstances of the country will permit all penal statutes at present in existence against the Roman Catholics.
Many saw what he was at, and he was rewarded with hisses, and a devastating reply from Dr. MacDonald.
Gentlemen, this has been the language of the Protestant people and of our much vaunted Irish Parliament these 40 years. The Roman Catholics are to be liberated from time to time. It is not the first period in history in which the same game has been played. The situation of the African is to be ameliorated. Slave traders will cease importing slaves from time to time, according to expediency. Consider the case of Cuba and Hispaniola. When the Spaniards invaded, their officers divided amongst themselves the people, as well as their lands and treasures. Some became possessed of 1,400 head of people. The Dominicans and Franciscans protested against the enslavement of the Indians. They carried their protest to the august tribunals of Spain. The tribunals proceeded exactly as Mr. Holmes suggests that we should now proceed here. The question of the right to the Indian to liberty was admitted. The question of expediency was difficult. They agreed that the Indians should be liberated from time to time, but that time has never arrived, nor can it now ever, because the race of Indians was exterminated. They were exterminated from time to time. Would to God, therefore, you would not join in with the language of a court in extending her blessings of freedom piecemeal. For what is freedom but a jest and a farce if its blessings are dispensed and received as a favour, instead of being considered as an inheritance and a right?
It was the year of 92, the French did plant an olive tree, the symbol of great liberty, and the people danced around it. And was I not telling thee, the French declared courageously that equality, freedom, and fraternity would be the cry of every nation. Behold, may all of humankind, emancipated with the French combine, may laurels green all on them shine, and their sons and daughters wear them. May every tyrant shake with dread and tremble for their guilty head. May the fleur-de-lis in dust be laid, and they no longer wear them. For was not I telling thee, the French declared courageously that equality, freedom, and fraternity would be the cry of every nation.
Yet there was still another eloquent voice urging caution, none other than the minister of the First Presbyterian Church, the Reverend William Bruce.
My sentiments respecting the position of the Roman Catholics are generally known to this assembly. My support for their gradual admission to the franchise and for the abolition of the penal laws against them are no transient enthusiasms of the day. However, when I hear the words of Mr. Payne in The Rights of Man pleaded for, as for a text of Scripture, and from which not the smallest deviation is to be made, then I must differ. If this argument is brought forward as justification for the instant transfer of power from one body of people to another, despising every caution in the mode of granting it, and regardless of the past history of the country, its present condition, or the mixed genius of its inhabitants, then I must differ again. If we are to follow, without restriction, the theory of human rights, where, may I ask, will it lead us? Are we then to admit women, or juveniles, or paupers to the right of suffrage and elections, to places of office and trust, and as members of both Houses of Parliament?
Our equivocators were roundly defeated, but it was not to be the end of such debates. Come forward to July 1792, and the greatest public assembly of our time, the Belfast Volunteer Review and celebration of the French Revolution on the 14th of July. What a sight it was, with 5,000 of us, volunteers and citizens, crammed in to the central courtyard at the White Linen Hall, and certainly there to acclaim the French. We listened to William Sinclair.
It is not from vanity or ostentation that we, citizens of Belfast, citizen soldiers of this town and neighbourhood, take the liberty of addressing the representative majesty of the French people. We address you with that affectionate fraternity of heart, which ought to unite man to man in a mutual and inseparable union of interests, of duties and of rights, which ought to unite nation with nation into one great republic of the world. May you, legislators, maintain by the indefatigable spirit of liberty that constitution which has been planned by the wisdom of your predecessors, and never may you weary in your work until you can proclaim with triumphant security that it is finished. Impudent despots of Europe, is it not enough to crush human nature beneath your feet at home, that you must thus come abroad to disturb the domestic settlement of the nations around you, and put in motion your armies, those enormous masses of human machinery, to beat down every attempt that man makes for his own happiness? Success, therefore, attend the armies of France!
That was simply passed by acclaim. But then we come back to the question of rights in our own country, and another resolution. William Sinclair concluded.
We declare that no reform would answer our ideas of utility or justice which should not equally include all sects and denominations of Irishmen.
For church and state in close embrace is the burden of the human race, and people tell you to your face that long you will repent. For kings in power and preaching thrones, the cause of all our heavy groans. Down from your pulpits, down from your thrones, you will tumble unlamented.
Once again, the voice of caution was raised by Henry Joy, editor of the Belfast newsletter.
I must propose an alternative to the main resolution, that we uniformly rejoice in the gradual emancipation of our Roman Catholic brethren, and that we ardently look forward to the day when their entire enfranchisement shall be a measure not only of safety, but of expediency. I say that the Protestant mind is not sufficiently prepared to grant, nor the Catholic one universally prepared to receive, an immediate exercise of every right. Holding them forth on such an extended scale might widen rather than close the unhappy chasm which has long separated the two bodies.
Mr. Joy was wrong-footed by the resolution, which did not specifically mention Roman Catholics, but rather dealt with universal rights. A point immediately driven home by Samuel Nielsen, editor of the United Irish newspaper, the Northern Star.
I am amazed to hear Mr. Joy refer to any part of our resolution as a Catholic question.
It no more involves a Roman Catholic question than a church question, a Quaker or an Anabaptist question. The true question is whether Ireland should be free.
Then the Reverend St. Clair Kelburn weighed in.
Mr. Joy is like the thief who has taken another man's purse. He admits that this is unjust, but then he argues that he has kept it so long that the victim must be angry, and he cannot hand it back, or even a guinea from it, until he is assured that the victim is happy and contented. If necessary, he will wait until the victim dies, and then he may, or may not, give the purse back to his children, provided only that they are contented.
And this earned a retort from Henry Joy.
You make light of serious matters, Reverend Kilburn. In the Protestant mind, it is not the fear of giving back, it is the fear of having everything taken away.
But the Reverend Kilburn was more than able for him.
Poor simple people, what have you to give or have taken away? The whole inventory of your possessions amounts to no more than this: your rotten constitution, your rotten boroughs, your excise, your pension list, your taxes and your tithes. Truly it is time to quit this absurdity about giving or having taken away, and to join hands and voices with your brethren and recover the birthright all of us have lost.
Yet Henry Joy was not wholly bereft of support. Listen to Councillor Stewart.
Friends, I admire the idealism that we hear expressed so eloquently today. We would, however, be much wiser to temper our measures to the actual state of affairs. Large numbers are strongly averse to the intemperance of your resolution. Disgust this portion of the citizens by precipitate action, if you will, but you will make enemies of them, when, if you were only willing to proceed by degrees, you might yet win them as friends.
The Reverend Steele Dixon, minister at Portaferry, was another who poured scorn on a fearful few.
What is this? Gradual emancipation? How or when is the latter to be formed? I suppose we might conceive of this latter as the penal code, but this is to be abolished. Are Catholics to rise up, statute by statute, section by section, sentence by sentence, or, as imagine some of our gradual emancipators might prefer, letter by letter? How indeed may the Catholics proceed if we, from the beginning, doubt their fitness to do so? I myself deny that suggestion. They are indeed restricted by our wild system of laws, but they make and wear their clothes as we do. They excel in the common arts as we do, and if they have the chance, do we not see them quit the humble paths of life? If you still doubt their capacity, then tell us, how will they acquire it? Are we to postpone emancipation to a future generation, so that they will have time to intermarry with wise and capable Presbyterians such as yourselves and mend the breed?
I vainly do waste our time, and future ages prove this truth, that man is free by nature. Oh, that man is free by nature. Oh.
And so the amendment was lost, and the original motion was overwhelmingly carried.
Confusion to the enemies of French liberty.
May the glorious revolution of France teach the governments of the earth wisdom,
Lasting freedom and prosperity to the United States of America.
the rights of man,
The Union of Irishmen, without which we can never be free.
the sovereignty of the people acting by a just and equal representation,
The liberty of the press.
the abolition of the slave trade.
President Washington.
Mr. Tom Paine,
Liberty!
liberty! Our year of liberty soon enough came to an end, as England chose to make war with France. And to make war with the friends of France in Belfast.
And whereas several bodies of men, known as the Volunteers, and more particularly the Society of United Irishmen, have been collected into armed associations, and whereas they have been levied and arrayed in the said town of Belfast, and whereas that arms and gunpowder to a very large amount have been sent there, and whereas bodies of men in arms are drilled by day and night, we order the magistrates to disperse all such seditious and unlawful assemblies.
The Volunteers were suppressed, and the United Irishmen were driven underground. Henry Joy, for one, gloated.
The United Irishmen have engaged in imitation of Republican principles and language accompanied by very extravagant demands and menaces. They have said more than they meant and used threats which they are neither able nor willing to execute. Active force would have been more honest. I say so in the certainty that they are incapable of it.
I give you a catechism.
What time will there be peace?
When no man has more power than that of the knocking of another down.
What is the greatest absurdity in the world?
Tens of millions of people setting up one, perhaps, of the meanest of themselves to govern them, and telling him, "We are your humble slaves."
What is a parliament?
A collection of animals. Some who play cards, some who loyal, some who sleep, some who roar out of sedition and treason, but all of those who refuse to pray to God send them people to utter damnation.
What are the common curses of mankind?
The habit of affixing great ideas to little things. Hence the phrase, "as great as the king, although he is a German bastard."
What makes the people ignorant?
Slavery.
And what keeps mankind in slavery?
Cowardice.
We were no cards.
Ça ira, les aristocrates à la lanterne. Ça ira, les aristocrates on les pendra. Ça ira, les aristocrates à la lanterne. Ça ira, les aristocrates on les pendra. V'là 300 ans qu'ils nous promettent qu'ils vont nous accorder du pain. V'là 300 ans qu'ils donnent des fêtes et qu'ils entretiennent des catins. V'là 300 ans qu'on nous écrase, assez de mensonges et de phrases. On ne veut plus mourir de faim. Ça ira, les aristocrates à la lanterne. Ça ira, les aristocrates on les pendra. V'là 300 ans qu'ils font la guerre, au son des fifres et des tambours. Ça nous laissait du verbe faire, ça ne venait pas durer toujours. V'là 300 ans qu'ils prennent des hommes, qu'ils nous traitent comme des bêtes de somme. Ça ne pouvait pas durer toujours. Ça ira, les aristocrates à la lanterne. Ça ira, les aristocrates on les pendra. Le châtiment pour vous s'apprête, car le peuple apprend ses droits. Vous vous êtes bien payé nos têtes, ça les finit, messieurs les rois. Il faut plus compter sur les nôtres, on va s'offrir maintenant les vôtres, car c'est nous qui faisons la loi. Ça ira, les aristocrates à la lanterne. Ça ira, les aristocrates on les pendra. Ça ira, les aristocrates à la lanterne. Ça ira, les aristocrates on les pendra. Ça ira, les aristocrates à la lanterne. Ça ira, les aristocrates on les bombera.
Be the man whose dauntless soul oppression's sweat defies, and bids the tyrant thunder roll the song of freedom rise. Who laughs at all the conjured storms, state sorcery waits around, at power in all its varying forms, that title's empty sound. For we were right for the fight, everybody on their way. It was the men of '98 that led us to the fray. Hail ye friends united here in virtue's sacred ties. May you like virtue's self keep clear of pensioners and spies. May you by Bastille's ne'er appalled see nature's nights renew, no longer unavenged be called. Swinish multitude, we were right for the fight, everybody on their way. It was the men of '98 that led us to the fray. Hail to the men where'er they be, whose kindling minds advance. Reasons past for all ye be of Holland or of France. She comes for all, see freedom comes, to no one region bound. The curse of human will who assumes the claims the globe around. For we were right for the fight, everybody on their way. It was the men of '98 that led us to the fray. For we were right for the fight, everybody on their way. It was the men of '98 that led us to the fray.
When we rose up in the summer of 1798, we sang that song on our way to the Battle of Antrim.
For that's what the famous writer Edmund Burke had called people like us, the swinish multitude.
The French army came to help us, but it came too late, and with too little force. We went down to a bitter defeat.
Some still hoped for another rebellion, like Thomas Russell and Robert Abbott.
Both were executed for trying in 1803.
What then?
Listen to William Drennan, framer of the original United Irish Oath.
We must now be content to get reform more slowly, more peacefully, and from England instead of in circumstances of great and terrible trial.
Fat chance of that. Listen also to Henry Joy, the one-time gradual emancipator.
Let Protestants be indelibly impressed with this momentous truth, that an infrangibly determined adherent to the British connection, so long as Papists form the majority of the inhabitants of this island, is absolutely necessary to their existence.
No longer any pretense of a brotherhood of affection, just the politics of the sectarian headcount.
We had to look to eternity for an equality of rights.
Remember what it said on one of our banners back in 1792? We are still in embryo. The struggle continues.
That is why we still celebrate the landmarks of progress and the fall of the Bastille.
We still await the fall of many a Bastille.
Protestant dissenter, Catholic defender, we never will surrender, give up the rights of man. In case the best of all. In this then I have made known, let us then proclaim them, their cause it could have gained them.
Ils viennent jusque dans vos bas, égorger vos fils et vos campagnes. Aux armes, citoyens, formez vos bataillons, marchons, marchons, car sont un vieux, à nos sillons, que veut cette horde d'esclaves, de traîtres, de rois conjurés, pour qui ces ignobles entraves, ces fardés longtemps préparés, ces fardés longtemps préparés. Français pour nous, ah quel outrage, quel transport il doit exister. C'est vous qu'on doit méditer de rendre à l'antique esclavage. Aux armes, citoyens, formez vos bataillons, marchons, marchons, car sans Dieu, avec nos sillons. Enfants, que l'honneur, la patrie fasse l'objet de tous nos vœux. Ayons toujours l'âme nourrie des feux qui l'inspirent tous deux, des feux qui l'inspirent tous deux. Soyons unis, tout est possible, nos vies ennemies tomberont, alors les Français cesseront de chanter ce refrain si terrible. Aux armes, citoyens,